everybody. My name is Victoria. Welcome to the AFC, or the Astoria Filmmakers Podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Jim Galizia. Say hi, Jim.
Hi, Jim. We're going to have some fun here today. Today is our first episode of the podcast. We're calling it episode 0 because it's kind of more of an intro about us. Normally, we're going to have on some guests on the podcast where they will be able to talk about themselves. They'll talk about projects that they're working on. But today, we're going to talk about us. We're going to let you guys know a little bit of information about where we came from, what we do, and why we're hosting this podcast and what we want to get out of it. So basically, the podcast kind of came to be because I've been wanting to do a podcast for a while. And then I found out about this group, the AFC, the Astoria Filmmakers Club. And when I joined, on the first day, I was basically offered to do a podcast. And it was like, oh, this kind of clicks and this works. And I decided I wanted to do it with somebody else that I know. And I immediately thought of Victoria because she's a fantastic person. And don't blush. But no, I thought you were great. We've been friends for years, and it just kind of clicked to do this podcast with you. Especially too, we were talking about in the AFC, we were talking about what we would do with a podcast. And the reason we're doing a podcast is because the AFC is looking for projects that they can take on right away, and a podcast is easy enough to put together. So then coronavirus happened, but we're still able to try to start it up via Zoom, and until COVID all blows over, we will eventually do it in person. I think Zoom is the way to go for now. But basically, we were under the impression that we wanted to start a filmmaking podcast. I wanted to host it, and I kind of covered the filmmaker side of it, the behind the camera. But then the thought and idea of it, having somebody who's in front of the camera came to be, and that's where we roped in Victoria, and that's where you came in. And we've just been working on this podcast ever since.
It's been a beautiful couple weeks trying to transfer it from our original idea of doing it in person to putting it online. But if you can look at any right sides to doing it this way to start, is we can actually get a wider group of people. People have a little more time now, so we're able to actually talk to more people, reach more filmmakers, more actors, more creators, and we'll be able to get more people involved with this.
That's true. And normally we are kind of limited to the Astoria and Queens area, or New York City as well, which, there's no limit to the amount of filmmakers in and around the New York City area. So we should be pretty good. But right now we also have the opportunity to speak to people maybe outside of the country, which would be really fun if they speak English. I hope they do. But we can speak to people in California, all of Hollywood, who knows what we can get on the show. Though the show will be focused on the Astoria Filmmakers Club members and any other filmmakers we can reach out to. You never know. There's still the potential too. I don't think we should rule out the possibility of, once we start doing these in person, we can always still do it via Zoom if there is somebody that we want to have on the show and they're in LA or whatever other state. You can always come back to this format, which is possible.
Yeah.
Especially too, since you're down the road, like me and you could hop on the podcast and then just have somebody else Skype into it. That could be a possibility.
Exactly.
We're basically neighbors for those listeners that are interested in that. Victoria, I've known you for a very long time. It seems like forever. We met.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's definitely a good thing.
Okay.
Though we met working at Applebee's together in Times Square on 15th Street. That is where we met. I was just getting out of college and working as a waiter. You were a hostess at the time too?
Yeah. I had just moved to New York that same year, and I originally worked in the bridal industry as my survival job. But that didn't really afford a lot of opportunities to go audition and switch my schedule around. So my roommate at the time, Kedrin, got me the job at Applebee's, my first foray into the food industry, where a lot of other actors and filmmakers work.
Yeah. mean, I feel like any actor or filmmaker has to work in a restaurant at some point, or else they can't be an actor or filmmaker.
It's
It,
an unspoken prerequisite for being in
exactly.
the industry.
It's one of the few jobs that you can have that flexibility with your schedule to be able to go out at weird hours. You know, I'm sure you've done the 9 a.m. auditions on a Tuesday that you're like, why is this happening at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday? But
Yeah.
it looked like it
I've
hurt when I said
understood
that.
why audition. I mean, I get it being on the other side of projects now. So like you want to fit as much time as possible, but I feel bad for those actors that are like first thing in the morning. But both because I'm exhausted and I'm trying to be as into their performance and what they're giving me as possible. But when I go in on that side, I'm like, I'm not awake. I don't know. This isn't a great representation of me.
Yeah. Like, please don't film this movie at 9 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday because this is the performance you're going to get. If you film at 2 p.m. on a Friday, I might be more awake, you know?
I'm a
Um,
lot better.
so Victoria, why don't you start? Talk a little bit about yourself. Tell us about how you got into the acting career and how it sort of led into screenwriting, and you've written some plays, and give us a little general overview and then give us some details.
Yeah, sure. Well, I started acting when I was a kid, like a lot of other actors, doing school plays and stuff like that. And I I've always wanted to be an actor. I think, a couple times in my life things switched to like maybe I'll be a lawyer, or maybe I'll do something else, but it always came back to acting. So I went to college for acting. I went to DeSales University. They're located in Pennsylvania, not far from my hometown, and they house the Pennsylvania Shakespeare Festival, which was one of the main reasons I picked them. I happened to
What's your hometown?
Allentown, Pennsylvania. I
Oh,
don't know.
okay. Still Pennsylvania. Cool.
Yeah. So I'm a little obsessed with Shakespeare, so I wanted to go somewhere that would have good Shakespeare training. After I graduated in, I don't want to say 2010, with a BA in theater. I've worked at a couple regional theaters since then. And I kind of fell into the writing thing by accident, really. I moved to New York in 2013, and I was trying to expand my acting reel. And so I was auditioning or trying to audition for student films. But a lot of the student films, at least at the time, the female roles were not great. They were, eye candy on the set. They weren't actually very deep, interesting characters. So I decided, well, it's just a scene for a reel for people to see what I can do. So I'll just write something myself. I started writing a scene, and that turned into a one act, which eventually turned into a full length play. And that became my first play, Scar Tissue. And ever since then, it's been kind of a back and forth between acting and writing. So now I've got a second play that I'm working on. I started actually kind of looking into writing a series. But it's been a back and forth, but I love doing both. So
Very cool. Yeah, I saw Scar Tissue. I think I saw it multiple times. I saw it maybe 3 times.
yeah,
Uh,
well,
one,
you filmed one version for me.
I did. Well, because there was talk of going overseas and doing the show overseas, which is awesome.
Yeah.
You could call yourself an international playwright there, so that's great.
Sounds
Uh,
so swanky. I said it sounds really swanky.
it does. It sounds very swanky. Like when you take a sip of a drink, you have to put your pinky out. It'd be fancy. Um, but yeah, you've been doing all that stuff for a while now, which is really cool. It's cool to see some of your stuff come to life. Uh, I've written some stuff, and I know the feeling of writing something and not being able to make it because money is a thing, and it's hard to put that money into a project that you don't know if it's going to go somewhere or be, you know, you have to really want it. And I've written so much nonsense, and I didn't really want that nonsense. I have a couple of projects I definitely would love to bring to light, but money's still a thing. So one thing at a time. But
Money's always a thing. Actually, Scar Tissue was supposed to actually have its full first production this year, but thanks to COVID, it got pushed off. And again, it's always a question of money. of self-producing, is a way of just saying, screw it, I'm not waiting for someone else to tell me that my work is worth their time, because I know my work is good and it's worthy of being out there. But getting the funds is always fun.
Yeah. Even just to scrape together the play, because your play too, Scar Tissue, there isn't like major production value to it. You need a room, some chairs, and having a set would obviously help and all, but the content of the writing and what the characters and what they all go through, it stands on its own. I don't think you really need all that other stuff. It would just help and enhance it. But at the same time, any amount of money helps. You bring in any money in, and it benefits. But that's a whole can of worms, trying to get funding for a project.
Yeah, that could be a whole episode on its own.
Yeah. One of the things I do like about the AFC is that it is classified as a 501c3, which is pretty hard to do. I know your fiance Nick had some struggles trying to get a film for himself classified as a 501c3. And the obvious great benefit to that is that it's considered a charitable donation when you donate through your taxes. So you get a little bit of a tax refund or some compensation via tax time.
Yeah.
So it's an easy way for projects and organizations to get lots of funding to do something creative and fun. So the AFC is cool for that, because it can accept those donations.
I know one of the issues that my fiance is the co-founder of Cinema Veritas Productions, and they wanted to be classified as a 501c3 because their first project has a lot to do with cystic fibrosis. So there's a lot of room in there for charitable donations, for grants, for companies that do research and funding for cystic fibrosis to help. But a lot of those avenues for grants and funding for film are very narrow, especially when it's about a specific project. So I think the AFC might have a better opportunity because they're about a group and a collective rather than about one specific project. So it's more about networking in the community and helping bring up the next generation of filmmakers instead of about one specific project.
Yeah, and hey, if they start getting funding, maybe it's a good idea, Nick, to Cinema Veritas to team up with the AFC and use them as the piggy bank to fund this really great project. Because I was talking to Nick about it a little bit, and it's a great film. Well, I guess I'll talk about myself a little bit.
Yeah, tell us about yourself, Jay.
I grew up in New York. I'm from Long Island. I went to high school, and that's pretty much when I figured out that I wanted to work in film. I took a film production class, or I think it was like TV 101, where essentially I was a newscaster. I did the morning announcements. And I was always a very quiet kid. I feel like I had no friends. And then all of a sudden one day I was on the morning announcements in front of every student in the school. And I feel like I just found what I wanted to do. It was like waking up one day. That wasn't exactly, I didn't want to be a newscaster. I just knew that TV and film production was where I wanted to go. After that, I started picking up the camera and playing around with that. I've always wanted to just build up myself as a camera operator. When I went to college, I went to the New York Institute of Technology in Manhattan and went there for 4 years. Manhattan is the place to be for film and video. So I kind of figured I could go to a school out in Long Island, or I could just make the jump and go right into the city. I felt that once I made the decision to be in the film industry, I knew the city was eventually where I was going to be. And once I moved here, it was just like done deal. I don't think I'm going anywhere. I've been here for about 10 years now. I've been working in the film industry. I've been working as a camera operator, a DP, a camera assistant, production assistant. I've worked as a grip. I've been forced into like 2 acting roles that I didn't really like. So I really think I'm destined for behind the camera. I was in front of the camera. Someone was just like, hey, we need a random drug dealer. Can you do it? And I was like, I don't wanna, but I can't say no to the director right now. So I felt peer pressured into being a drug dealer, which isn't great. But,
That sounds terrible. If someone isolated that clip, that would sound terrible.
Please no one take that clip and run with it. I mean, anything for the sake of the film, you know. I'll do whatever it takes. But I've always loved working in the camera department. I've gotten more into writing as the years go on. I've written my own stuff. I definitely want to eventually direct my own stuff. Um, Inevitably, I'd love to make sci-fi and, you know, action movies, but, you know, like we were saying before, money is a thing, and those are the most expensive versions of what I want to do.
Mhm.
But the AFC seems like a really cool outlet for a lot of creative people. I've always looked for different groups of people I could join to team up, because filmmaking is very much a team sport. It's very hard to do anything just one person. Um, but I wound up starting my own company a couple years ago. I'm selflessly plugging by wearing the t-shirt right now, NuView Productions.
Mhm.
We started as a film production company. We wanted to do just fun films and skits, and it divulged and turned into more of a business. And we started doing videography. We do stuff for businesses. We film weddings, um, pretty much across the board. We shoot music videos. We shoot films. We did a film. We handled all the visuals for a film called Early Bird by Isaac Cintrone. He wrote this film and won this contest and got a really nice budget. Um, and we were able to kind of do a film for the first time, which was really cool. That was back in August, and it was a blast. I had a great time. I'd love to do more films like that too. It's a set in the 70s, and it's basically two people on the run after a bank robbery gone wrong, and they're trying to find the money. Uh, but yeah, I've been pursuing film and TV production for over 10 years now, and I still love it to this day. I mean, I still, you know, it's hard to keep pursuing it in the times that we're in with COVID and coronavirus and all, but I know people are going to come out of Corona much stronger and with a bunch of really greatly written content, because I know a lot of people are just writing right now.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of people like me that have all these great ideas, uh, that, you know, are just in this coronavirus funk, and it's hard to just stay on one thing. Uh,
Yeah.
I,
I I'm part of a theater group, and we had a meeting earlier in this whole epidemic, and you know, we were all just checking in and seeing how we were doing, and a lot of the members of the group were like, you know, oh, you know, my this other theater company I work with is doing this cool thing, and we're doing this reading online, and it's a reading series, and we're adapting this and this. And I at one point I felt very much like, am I the only one that's not handling this well? But there was one other actor who we both were like, we've showered today. We look presentable for you guys, and that's about the extent of it.
Hey, look, I shower every day, and I'm wearing the same pair of pants every day. So I mean, I'm sort of in this weird middle ground where I'm stable, but also I'm not changing my pants because I'm comfy, coronavirus comfy. Okay,
I that trademark that.
trademark it. I'm gonna make a T-shirt that says coronavirus comfy. Uh, I feel like that could be problematic, but you know, what are you gonna do?
Yeah,
So I mean, you know, we are lucky enough though to have this podcast, because though we were going to we literally were about to start filming. I think it was like a Thursday, and we said let's film on Monday, and on like Saturday or Sunday they were like, we're shutting down the country. So coronavirus kind of put a halt to the in-person versions of the podcast,
mm-hmm.
but it allows us to kind of start fresh with the podcast on Zoom. So this is something new and cool that we can do. And it's also been keeping us a little busy with planning everything. It's given us something to do during the quarantine times. Um, but yeah, I'm glad we can get this thing going, get this off the ground.
Yeah,
Normally, this might be the part of the show where we would normally rope in our day player, aka our guest. The day player will come on, kind of give a little bit about them, give them set their own spiel of where they came up and what they do in the industry. They'll talk about projects that they've got going on, projects they've done, projects that they plan to do, their dreams and aspirations for this industry as well. Um, we might watch a film or two on the podcast if they have something to showcase. If they don't, that's okay too. They might just have an idea they want to talk about. They might come to us with a script. and give us some plot points, and we can discuss those. And we're also going to be asking them for their movie of choice, movie suggestion that we can review and talk about on the show. In lieu of having no day player today, because this is our sort of prequel episode to the podcast, our episode 0 here, we've suggested some movies for each other. And you picked your favorite movie, I picked my favorite movie. Now, I don't feel like my movie is really like my favorite, but
Well,
it's hard to choose a favorite.
yes, I feel like, different points in my life, I would say different movies are my favorite. But especially in the environment that we live in right now, I felt like my pick, The Goodbye Girl, is a feel-good movie that I needed and I love. So that was my choice for my favorite movie at the moment.
Yes, my choice was Logan. And it's hard to pick a movie that's a part of a greater franchise because I personally, I could probably say I don't have a favorite movie. I have favorite parts of different movies. And then someone would say another part, and I'd be like, that's actually my favorite. And then someone would say a different part, and I'd be like, you know what? No, that's really my favorite part. But Logan is one of those movies that I feel like kind of stands on its own outside of the whole X-Men and Marvel and all the superheroes. It though it is a part of the greater X-Men universe, it does kind of sit on its own a little bit. And because of that, is the reason I picked it. So.
Well, absolutely. It's even though I know Ryan Reynolds and Deadpool make fun of it for jumping on the R-rated bandwagon afterwards, I think that as wonderful as the Marvel Cinematic Universe is, after a while you do get inundated with the same content, and eventually, like, these problems that they have in the films and they have as characters, they get worse and worse. World devastation, destroying half of all of life in the universe. They're not going to be PG-13 reactions to things.
Yeah.
So I think that this film definitely goes against the grain of what everything else had really been at that point.
Yeah, and I mean, Disney's always doing their thing with Marvel movies. They're definitely going for more of the family-friendly market. And now that they bought Fox back, they have all the X-Men characters back. So we can probably expect a little bit less of an R rating. Although they did say Deadpool is probably going to keep its R rating because that's hard to change.
Yeah, you can't have Deadpool and not have it have an R rating. Then just don't make the film at that point. It's not worth it.
Well, I mean, Deadpool is considered an X-Men character, and he might wind up being the only character that isn't rewritten from the ground up from Marvel, now that those universes are kind of colliding and ending the X-Men universe. Mm-hmm. Deadpool might be the only surviving character. Maybe the other characters that pal around with him, like Colossus and whoever else is in those movies too, but we'll see. I mean, we don't know Disney's plan yet for those movies. I think all that they have confirmed and said is that Ryan Reynolds will be back as Deadpool and that it will still be R-rated, and then everything else is up in the air. So, but we're talking about Logan. Logan was the very last film that Hugh Jackman did as Wolverine. I believe he was in 9 movies as Wolverine. He might be the record holder in the world. Logan came out in 2017. He has been part of the X-Men franchise since the year 1999. He has had...
How long ago?
1999, 21 years ago.
Oh my God.
That was the very first X-Men movie. I think they were doing production in 1999. The actual first X-Men movie came out in 2000. Then a couple years later, they did X-Men 2, and then eventually they had X-Men 3, and then it spun off into X-Men First Class and X-Men, all the different versions of X-Men. They've had multiple timelines. It's very confusing. Hugh Jackman's been this weird running person through all of it. And parts large and small, he's been in all these movies. I don't know if that counts his one cameo in the X-Men First Class movie where they walked in trying to recruit him and he just goes, "Fuck off," and kicks them out.
Mm.
because that was literally like a 2-second cameo. But yeah,
I
he's
mean,
definitely.
doesn't it count in Deadpool when Brad Pitt is the invisible character and you see his face for 2 seconds before he gets electrocuted? That counted as a cameo.
It's a cameo. I don't know if it counts to say, oh, he's portrayed Wolverine in 9 films.
Mm.
Is it 9 or is it 8? Because does the cameo count as a full portrayal? But be that as it may, he's been in a fuck ton of movies as Wolverine. Logan, I think, was finally the opportunity he had to do the movie with an R rating and give a very grounded, personal, gritty story as that character, and it was a great way to send it off because he's kind of done with it.
Yeah.
He has said he would come back to that character only if it was an X-Men and Avengers crossover. So only if he's doing it with like Iron Man and Captain America and all these big characters, which I think after Avengers Endgame isn't really an option anymore anyway. So,
Yeah.
But that being said, the movie is directed by James Mangold, who did make the X-Men, not the X-Men Origins movie for Wolverine, but the next one where he was in Japan. I think it was called The Wolverine in 2013. He made that one. He had a lot of pressure from the studio to kind of do certain things with it. And basically it was in his contract that if he did that movie the way that they wanted, he could do the next movie the way he wanted. Luckily, he got to do that because Logan was so critically acclaimed and well put together. The movie is based on the comic book Old Man Logan, loosely, by Mark Miller and Steve McNiven. It follows an aged version of Wolverine and Charles Xavier as they try to protect this young mutant who ends up being known as a clone of Wolverine, a female clone, named Laura. And it stars Hugh Jackman, Patrick Stewart, Daphne Keane, nominated in the Oscars for Best Adapted Screenplay at the 90th Academy Awards. It grossed over $619 million worldwide and became the 6th highest grossing R-rated movie of all time. And that is under the 2 Deadpools. Joker is number 1 by far. I believe It is also there. I forget what the other one is. But yeah, it's definitely one of the best R-rated movies I've ever seen. And I enjoyed the crap out of it. I'm a
I
huge
think,
comic book fan, so any nerd superhero movie, I'm all about it.
well, and I think, the age of, we grew up with comic book characters. They've been with, with us since we were little. And so growing up and getting, a version of these characters that we've loved for so long that seems actually extremely real and extremely grounded, it just makes the whole experience so much better.
Yeah, and I mean, me and you are big gamers as well, and me and you both played The Last of Us, and you played that before me. You had such a love and devotion for it, and then I saw Logan, and I had such a love for that movie, and then I finally got a PS4 and I played The Last of Us, and that story, and it's so easy to look at The Last of Us story and see a version of Logan in a weird way.
Oh yeah,
Because they're
absolutely.
very similar. And immediately upon playing that game, I was like, I need her to see Logan. So I remember I made you sit down and watch the movie with me.
Yes,
Uh,
you did.
but what did you think? The first impressions when you first watched Logan, what did you think of the movie?
um, I I absolutely loved it. I thought it was so well done. And as someone who has not actually watched a lot of the X-Men films, I think I've seen 2 or 3 of them out of the whole franchise.
There's
Uh,
probably 2 or 3 good ones. So a lot of
yeah,
a lot of them are pretty hit or miss.
I think most of the ones I've seen were miss. But I knew that I was very familiar with the X-Men characters as a kid. My brother it is still a huge comic book fiend. So I was very familiar with what I thought Wolverine was. And seeing this incredibly humanized version of such a fantastical character was incredible. And of course, Hugh Jackman is amazing. Patrick Stewart is incredible. And the actress who played the little girl was so amazing. And especially for
Daphne
not
Keane is her name. She's
Daphne,
fantastic. Yeah.
and for not speaking for most of the film.
She just scowls and she
Yeah.
just makes, shoots daggers with her eyes.
Mhm.
And she was just such a badass 9-year-old and fantastic. I don't know how, I think she was actually 12 when they filmed Logan, but she's a great actress too. I watched a show called His Dark Materials,
Yeah.
which is that on HBO? I think it's on HBO, and she's the star of that, and she was great in that too. Also still co-starring James McAvoy, who's the younger version of Professor X. So I'm sure that's how that came to be. Sometimes actors work together or they're in the same franchise and they get pulled into other projects, which is cool. But yeah, so I mean, I love that movie. I'm glad you liked it too. Um,
I cried a lot.
it's crazy because that movie, as down to earth and gritty as it is,
Mhm.
it's also an incredible movie for special effects and stunt work. So when the young version of Wolverine shows up,
Mhm.
it was shocking, obviously. And I mean, spoiler alert, but the movie's been out for 2 years now, 3 years now.
Yeah.
So get on watching it. But the young version of Wolverine, this new cloned version, which is just a savage, maybe 30-year-old version of Wolverine, of just Wolverine, gets cloned and shows up and he kills Professor X right out the gate. And yeah, it just hurts to think about it. And then the older version of Wolverine, which is portrayed as in his 50s or so, he comes in, has to fight this younger version of himself, and it's such a full circle thing to do. I feel like a lot of movies tend to do that. They had like that Will Smith Gemini Man movie where it's like the young version of himself. A lot of movies like Terminator, he's always fighting another version of himself. And it gets very cliche, but I did not get that from Logan. Logan he's always been a clone, or he's always had people cloned from him. The younger version, the girl who plays X-23, Daphne Keane, who plays X-23, her character is a clone of Wolverine also. So there's a bunch of cloning going around in that movie. So, but the special effects that they did to de-age Hugh Jackman were incredible. Basically, they had a body double come in, and they did like a face replacement and just put a young version of Hugh Jackman's face. And some of the stuff that these guys are able to do with de-aging is incredible because
Well, that's what they should have done with The Irishman. And that, I think, is a big mistake that they made in The Irishman, where they de-aged Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, and Joe Pesci, but they still had the actors, these 70, 80-year-old actors playing 30-year-old versions of themselves. And when they move like 70, 80-year-old men.
Yeah, they didn't
I
get body doubles to sit in for them and replace the faces.
And that's what they could have done.
Yeah, I think that goes towards Martin Scorsese, who's not used to the special effects type of world. So he wants to be authentic and have the actors play their own characters, as opposed to somebody else being the body double, sitting in as Robert De Niro and then just replacing that guy's face with Robert De Niro's face.
I mean, I think it would have been fine had they stuck with like 50, 60-year-old. When they got to the 50, 60-year-old, then you can still have Robert De Niro play that version of himself. But when you get to like the 30-year-old version of him, like boot stomping somebody, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Not move that way. And that's something that I think Logan got spot on, is to have someone younger and who still moves that way. And it really contrasts where Logan is now versus where he was.
For sure. And I mean, I'm pretty sure too that they didn't just do the body double and then face replacement for all the shots. Hugh Jackman's still very much young enough to do all those things. He seems to get more cut the older he gets. He gets more muscly with every Wolverine movie. Logan definitely brought him down to reality, but if you see him in like the Days of Futures Past, I think is the scene where he wakes up in a bed in the 70s or something, and he doesn't know how he got there, but he's shirtless, and you just look at him and you're like, how old is this guy? It's incredible. But he's always been in fantastic shape. He still is. And I think they did a lot of filming with him and then just de-aging his face. But then the shots where there's obviously two versions of himself in it, they had to have another person come in. But that technology, and I mean, some of it for The Irishman was a mess. It looked really weird. They did a lot of weird stuff with his eyes. I couldn't stop looking at the guy's eyes. They were very glossed over. We could do a whole episode on The Irishman just because I watched it, and I feel like that movie could have been really amazing for me if it was cut down to 2.5 hours. I could have cut a whole hour of that movie out, and it would have been incredible. But it was just Martin Scorsese likes to sit in those moments, and I feel like he sat for way too long, and it took me a while to get through that one, but I still enjoyed it. But let's talk about The Goodbye Girl. If you want to read off some factoids about it. Say again?
That I forced you to watch.
You did not force me. You suggested it, and I still watched it because I take your suggestions. I didn't hate it. I should say that. I did not hate it.
Okay, good. I was scared that you were going to hate it. So when I got text message from you with screenshots going, what is this film?
Well, I didn't know anything about it. I mean, the benefit of movies like Logan is you can be like, all right, there's this character, Wolverine. He's already been in 8 other movies, so you kind of have an idea of what Logan can be about. When you said there's this movie, it's called The Goodbye Girl, I had nothing. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Halfway through it, I found out it was a romantic comedy. So at first, I thought it was just going to be this drama movie with this woman who was just kind of confused about life. Like I don't think she had a good grasp on what she was doing.
Not at all.
And then I thought the movie was going to follow her and her journey as she gets kicked out of the house and has to find a new place to live as this random guy. I didn't expect when the guy who was moving in, I didn't know that was like an important character because I didn't recognize Richard Dreyfuss. Is that who it was?
Yeah.
I didn't even recognize him just because it's from 1977, so it's kind of an older movie at this point. But when he knocked on the door originally and he tried to key in, I was just like, oh, this guy's just going to be a side character who gets them kicked out of the house. And that was going to be it. But then as they lived together and they had this really cool dynamic, I thought it was really cool the way the movie played out. I did think that their romance came out of nowhere.
I don't feel that way, but I can see why, because they hate each other so much at the beginning.
They had a little chemistry, and they had this nice back and forth with each other, and it was always chemistry of like, I hate you and you hate me, and then all of a sudden it was like, and I'm gonna kiss your neck in the bathroom, and it got really. It all of a sudden was like they're in love, and I was like, that came out of nowhere for me. It came out of nowhere, but I'm also not used to the romantic comedy genre, so I don't know if that's normal for those types of movies.
I mean, it's definitely not like a romantic comedy today where it's, the whole beginning of the film is just setting up like, oh, why can't I meet a great guy? Oh, why can't I meet a great girl? Or I'm never settling down, so until I meet the right one kind of a thing. But I think that because also I don't think this story could ever be set in a modern way. I know they tried to remake it with Patricia Heaton. That's her name, right? Patricia Heaton and Jeff Daniels recently. I don't think it did that well. And I don't think you can really set it any other time than like the 70s of like this woman who gets kicked out of her house unknowingly. Her house is sublet by her ex-boyfriend who left them high and dry. And he sublet it to his friend without telling either party. So they just decide, well, you can move in, strange man, while I have my daughter here. Like
that wouldn't track today. That would be like, I'm calling the fucking cops and you're going on the street with your kid. I don't give a fucking shit.
Right.
Can you imagine moving to New York from, I think he's from Chicago. His character was from Chicago. And imagine getting all the way to New York, going to the apartment that you've leased, you've spent 3 months of rent on, and there was people in it living there still. I would have flipped my shit. I would have, at 2 o'clock in the morning, I don't care. I would have called the police. I would have immediately had them removed. I already paid for this place. I would have done whatever I had to do. I don't think even in the 70s someone would have tolerated that and then moved in together. I think that's a definitely weird thing that happened.
Yeah. But you suspend your disbelief a little bit for movies and for plays, and I think that's something
Yeah.
we can just
I don't know, there's
continue.
something really believable about a guy that has knives come out of his hands, but suspend your disbelief, I suppose.
Mhm.
Uh, Now, Richard Dreyfuss actually won the 1977 Academy Award for Best Actor for his portrayal as Elliot Garfield. During the film, he was also the youngest man to win an Oscar at the time.
Yep.
He was 30 years old. That was the youngest until years later, Adrian Brody won it when he was just under 30 for his role in The Pianist. So he was the youngest person to win an Oscar for years and years.
Mhm.
Um, who was the actress in the movie?
Marsha Mason.
Marsha Mason.
Mhm.
Yeah, they were great. They definitely, once the romance part of the movie kind of kicked off, I feel like they had great chemistry.
Oh yeah.
They definitely had this cool dynamic, especially with the daughter too. Uh,
Yeah.
that was something that I feel like I don't even see that in a lot of romantic comedies today, where there's complications beyond. And not that I'm saying her daughter was a complication, but saying that like usually it's just guy and girl, they meet. Oh, I can't love you because reason, and then they overcome that reason.
Mhm.
Uh, this wasn't a thing to overcome. It was just like I also have a daughter, and you have to rope her into this too, because it's not just a two-way street. There's this whole other factor that plays into it, because a mother with her daughter. I did find at the end when he was like, I'm coming back, and shouting from the phone booth and on the phone with them and stuff, the mom was real quick to just leave her young daughter behind and in New York on her own.
But she didn't go.
But she didn't go, but she was ready to. And they were like, you could just drop her off at your friend's house. And she was like, okay, I'll do it.
No, you watched that part wrong. You watched that part
How did I
completely
watch it
wrong.
wrong?
You watched it wrong. So at the end, she's upset because one, this is what happened with the idiot that got her in this mess with the sublet in the first place.
And
He,
apparently the guy before that too.
yeah, they just keep leaving her. So she's like, okay, great. So he's going off to do a film because she's always involved with actors because she was a dancer. Um, but she just wanted him to ask. That was the whole thing. It's like she's not going to drop her daughter off. She's not going to leave our daughter. She just wanted to know that he wanted her there and he's in it for the long haul. She wasn't ready to just go, okay, daughter goes off and stays with friend for 3 months while we film. You watched it wrong.
Yeah, and I mean, that is sometimes how it happens. You get a call as an actor, and the next day you have to immediately be ready to go anywhere, do anything. Uh, so this actor got this basically dream role of some sort, uh, was off to another state, and the whole idea of it was that he wasn't just going to say goodbye and dip. Uh, and the thing that got me when he was leaving and saying, I'm leaving, I will be back, and they were like, didn't believe him. When he's leaving and he says, see a kid to the girl, I just got, she hates being called kid. That got me a little bit. Because that's what all the other guys have said. They just called her kid. They didn't really say her name. But then, he left his guitar behind. That was a big deal. And, the fact that he left possessions in their apartment means he's definitely going to come back. Um, I thought it was a weird ending because at the end of the movie, he's leaving. And we know he's coming back, but it's also like he's leaving. We don't really see the happily ever after because it's the part of the movie where they're going away from each other. We know eventually he'll come back, but, I also feel like this movie wouldn't play that well today because, someone might just leave a guitar behind. They're not, they might just be like, screw the guitar, I'll get a new guitar.
Yeah, it's a different world today where people are like, meh, I'm out.
Yeah. Also, when they talked about like how much money they had to get through the week, that got me because it was like, yeah, she was like, oh man, I could use $20 to buy food for the week. And I was like, that's one Grubhub meal for me. So
Yeah.
that was a lot. And when she got mugged in the street and they just took all her stuff, they robbed her and they took all her stuff, but then she had so much stuff to pick up. I noticed a
Yeah.
lot of continuity things in this movie.
Well, no, they didn't take all her stuff. She dropped the bag
She dropped the bag.
because they stole her purse and they ran away with her purse.
Right. I just feel like she was picking up so many things. And then when they chased after the car, there was more things littered through the street. Like more than two people could have carried. And like, I think they just added more. Like a box of spaghetti was just scattered everywhere. And
Yeah.
there was also the scene where Richard Dreyfuss's character, Elliot, comes back after his play does really poorly. And he's super drunk.
Well, you have to talk about the play because I feel like every actor can relate to getting involved in a production that you think is going to be, a huge opportunity for you. You get in the room and you realize the director is nuts and they're taking the play in a completely different direction and you're stuck now and you don't know how to get out of this, but you don't want to do it. So Elliot essentially comes to New York for his first off-Broadway production of Richard III, and he's playing Richard III, but the director's like, you're going to play it gay. And there's no reasoning behind it. They're not trying to like make a statement. This is the 70s. He's just doing it for the sake of doing it. And Elliot is like, I'm killing my career by doing this.
Yeah, especially too, he said, like, I've been rehearsing this character for months.
Mm-hmm.
The way it's, practicing playing this character the way it was portrayed originally for a while. And then all of a sudden they were like, yeah, we're going to switch it up. I've definitely, even behind the camera, been attached to projects that you think are going to make your career. You think it's going to set you up. And then you're like, there's so many things wrong with this. I've kind of taken on the hobby, the habit, I suppose, of when I work on a project and I'm not in a creative position. And I'm, because sometimes I'm in a camera position or I'm working in the lighting department. Mm-hmm. And all I have to do is make sure that the camera's built correctly. And I have batteries charging and I can swap out the cards, the SD cards and stuff. So sometimes I don't need to know the story. So in those scenarios, I don't read the script at all. Because sometimes when you take on a job, you want it to be great, obviously. But there's also a hierarchy on the film set that, you have to kind of know your place. And when you're a camera person or a camera assistant or, of course, production assistant, it doesn't really, it's not your position to really go to the director and say, I don't know if this part of the script is really working. I don't know if playing Richard III gay is really going to make any sense for this production. Mm-hmm. But, it depends on what role you're in. I've taken on the idea of, when I'm in a non-creative role, I don't even mess with the creative because unless it's like a friend of mine that I can have an honest conversation with, it's a little dicey. You don't want to, tread on other people's creativity because you never know what other people are going for. They might have a vision and their vision might be really great and it might turn out really great or it could turn out really bad.
Well, and that's always the tough thing. A lot of times, projects like this, they're people's babies. It's hard to invite another eye in to be constructive on it. You're opening yourself up to that, and sometimes it doesn't go very well.
Yeah. It's also notable too that The Goodbye Girl is the first romantic comedy to earn more than $100 million at the box office, which is pretty crazy. That's an awesome accomplishment for romantic comedies everywhere. Mm-hmm. Romantic comedies, they do very well still today. Though I think today now they've gotten a little bit more dramatic. I feel like in the early 2000s, we really had like a romantic comedy genre and they were all pretty similar.
Yeah.
Where a girl who has a great career can't find love, and then a guy comes in and swoops her off her feet. Mm-hmm. And that I think that story is it still works. It's a story about finding love, and it's kind of adapted into more than the last 20 years has kind of made it. Over time, I think it got better, and there's more drama. I think the romantic comedy genre has definitely progressed. Pretty side by side with the superhero genre, weirdly enough. As technology becomes more accessible to people, and as video effects become easier to produce, filmmaking becomes easier for people that aren't working in huge Hollywood budgets to put something together, especially romantic comedies too, because you're not blowing up any buildings. So it's a lot cheaper to do that than to film a superhero big blockbuster movie.
Yeah.
That's another reason too. I've never been into horror movies, weirdly enough, because they used to rely so heavily, because it was so underfunded, on jump scares and just the jump. It never appealed to me. It always just made me mad. So whenever I got scared watching a jump scare movie, I would just be like, fuck this movie. Can't do it.
Well, you know what? I recently rewatched Cabin in the Woods, the Joss Whedon film from, I think it was 2009 ? I'm definitely getting those dates wrong.
Oh, with Chris Hemsworth. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
which they filmed before he became an Avenger. So and
they filmed it, and then they decided this movie's not going to do so well right now. Let's bank it, which is it's not a frequent thing for Hollywood to do. They said, let's bank this movie, let's hold on to it for a minute. And then I think a couple years, like 2 or 3 years after that, Chris Hemsworth blew up and became really famous. And they were like, all right, now there's a little star power behind this movie, or a little more star power, because there are a couple well-known actors in it.
Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah. And, those added bits of star power really made this movie pop when it came out, especially with coming out, like, I think Thor came out right around the same time.
Well, it premiered at South by Southwest, I'm pretty sure. But I remember after I rewatched it, I wanted to read up on the history of it and like where it kind of came from. And it, Joss Whedon essentially said it was a love-hate letter to the horror genre, because the horror genre, used to be about the jump scare and everything else, but then essentially it just became like torture porn, where it's just about tits and blood.
Yeah.
But, that's essentially what all these movies are about. They're not, they're not creative anymore. They're not, like, one of the scariest movies to me was Blair Witch Project. Up through the whole thing, I was like, this is a little scary, but it's not, it's kind of whatever. And then you get to the end and it scared the crap out of me. But there was no real blood. There was no, nothing too much of the jump scare kind of thing about it. But, most of those movies nowadays are just, let's throw a bunch of blood on a naked chick.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, honestly, I agree with you. I think horror movies have been coming back a little bit. And there certainly are exceptions to all of what we just said, where there are standouts that are really well-made films that are in the horror genre. Would we consider, I would almost say Get Out might be a horror movie, because that scared the crap out of me. And
I haven't seen it yet. I need to watch it.
Get Out, that's a movie. Jordan Peele really moved his career over. He pivoted, because he was always in the comedy world.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he came out with Get Out, and it was just a game changer. That movie was really great. Definitely worth a watch. We could do a whole episode on that one.
Yeah, we could.
And, I think horror's on the up and up in terms of the quality of horror movies, but I think the scary movies all hit the nail on the head, because they were all parodies of it, and just the parodies of, like, Scream and all those types of murder movies where it's just nonsense. It really was just like, this is the perfect parody of it, because it points out all those things that you just said.
Yeah.
Those are fun watches too. Those are the dumbest of comedies that I love. I miss Anna Faris, because she was always great in those movies.
Yeah.
Let's shoot into some current events. We have some stuff going on today, even though we are trapped inside for COVID and coronavirus. The whole industry is kind of halted right now. There are still shows coming out. There are still things happening. However, because of COVID, Hollywood is all but writing off 2020, according to this article on Vulture, which we can link in the description. If you're listening via audio, definitely check out our Instagram or our YouTube versions. We have all these links. We'll line them up for you. Hollywood is all but writing off 2020. What does that mean for the future of movies? this article is basically just about how, because of coronavirus, 2020 is kind of just a bad year for movies. A lot of movies have been delayed in their releases. I don't think we're going to see, besides what's already been filmed and was ready to be released, I don't think late 2020 is going to be a good year for movies at all. And I think we're going to have to wait till 2021, 2022 to really start seeing movies return in full swing.
I mean, there were huge blockbusters that got shut down at the beginning, or at like pre-production, or at the very beginning of filming, even halfway through filming, that had to stop filming. And then you have the movies that were ready or just about ready to be released, and their big premieres had to be pushed back. And they're worried about, like, how you can't push it back forever. You can't push it back for that long. But if you're going to premiere it in this time of social distancing, how are you going to create the revenue that you expected to make from it?
Yeah,
and that,
because at the end of the day, it's still a business. You still have to treat it like a business. So if a movie, comes out and it only makes $20 million, which sounds great to me, but
yeah,
when
right
you
on,
have,
$1 million.
right, when you have a budget of 200 million and you make 20 million, that's no good. And I know, I believe the movie Bloodshot was the hardest victim of Corona, because the movie was maybe out for a week and then got shut down. But other than that, I believe Onward was also one of the movies that was pretty affected, but now it's on Disney Plus as well.
Mm-hmm.
That movie kind of got hit hard by the box office. It's notable too that the box office, for the first time since it opened, claimed $0 in revenue, which is crazy. Like, you would think there'd be at least one movie theater out there that's like, we're still selling tickets because we're crazy, because this is America. But it's good, though. I'm glad that movie theaters are not playing around. They're quarantined. They're like, we can't do it. It's not an option.
They're going to have to, I mean, movie theaters are on the decline anyway, because, if things are moving so fast in this industry now, instead of waiting 6 months to a year for something to be released, if you miss it in the theater, you'll see it in a month or less on streaming services. You can rent it for home, even though, for less than what you would pay for, if there's a couple that lives at home, you're going to pay less to rent it once on your screen than you're going to pay for tickets at a movie theater. So I think this is just kind of forcing the whole industry to adjust now to what was coming down the pipeline anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I immediately came up with the idea of, and this does not benefit us here in Astoria or New York, but anywhere else in the country that has the space for it, do a drive-in movie theater. Have movies come out in a drive-through, because people could pull into parking spots. They're socially distant. They got the car doors closed. I think it's more than safe and fair to say that they can do that, roll their windows down, have some speakers laid out throughout the area. And that's the best version of a movie theater I think we can get for now, while we're not able to, be close to one another. I used to hate being shoulder to shoulder with people watching movies anyway. But at the same time, it's hard to say that experience of going to the movies is, shut down for the moment. That's because when you go see a new movie and it's on the big screen, it's just uncomparable to watching it on your 40-inch TV at home. It's just not the same.
And some movies are just meant to be seen in a theater like that. Like, I didn't see A Quiet Place, but from everyone I know who has seen it, they all said, like, that's a movie that you need to experience in a theater.
Yeah, if we put Quiet Place in the horror category, which I think it fits in the horror category.
Horror thriller.
Horror thriller, yeah. It is definitely a movie that people could sit in the theaters. Every time I think I went to see it, and people in the audience are going, "No, don't do that. Don't turn that corner. Don't do it. The monster's right there. Oh, she's going to say something. The monsters are going to hear you." There's movies like that are very reactionary. Another reason why I'm a huge nerd is because of the Avengers movies, because there's still a video that goes viral every once in a while of just the audio of the end of Avengers Endgame, when Captain America picks up Thor's hammer, and just the feeling you get when you're in the theater and you see it, but there's also hundreds of people screaming because they're so
Yeah.
excited. That feeling too, I think, is unparalleled, and you just can't get it at home because you can, I don't know about you, but I watch movies and I'm just deadpan. Like it could be the funniest thing, and I'm like, huh. Like in like unless I have someone to laugh with, like
Yeah.
I'm internally laughing, but but
Well, it's, and it's the same with theater and performing, but like, you feed off the energy. Like even if it's not a live performance in front of you, you feed off of how everyone else is reacting to the film. I don't
100%.
know if you've seen clips of what they're doing with wrestling right now, because they're still doing the SmackDown shows and Raw and all of that stuff, but they're doing it with no audience.
Yeah, I've also seen John Oliver. He's been doing Last Week Tonight with no audience.
Yeah, say
Um,
all the late night people are doing, shows from home, but like John Oliver has that specific, like it looks like just an empty set.
yeah,
It doesn't look like he's shooting on his
just
phone
the
or his
lack of
camera.
the live audience. The energy is gone,
Mhm.
and the World Wrestling WWE, the fact that they're even trying to do it, I think, good for them if they can get away with it and they can make sure that their people aren't sick and they're not spreading anything, go for it. But just the crowd that is at live shows during WWE matches, that's a huge part of it. So it takes away a lot when you don't have the thousands of people in the audience screaming and ranting. And same thing for sports. It'd be crazy to even say. I know they're trying to do MMA fights, and there was a joke running around about if they could find out if they could test their fighters and see if they could do this fight and then book it on an island and acquire a private island. And
Yeah.
everyone immediately was like, "That's the plot of Mortal Kombat. Don't do that. That's people are gonna start dying for the sake of pay-per-view MMA fights, and it's just not gonna be cool." And
Yeah.
everyone comparing Dana White, who is the leader of the AFC, to the guy who makes all the Mortal Kombat fights. And
You mean the UFC?
yes, what did I say? AFC?
AFC.
I assure you, AFC filmmakers, we are not trying to start MMA fights. That's not what we're doing. All these acronyms.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, Corona is definitely taking major hits on the industry. One of the ways that we might actually find new forms of entertainment through Corona, because we're all locked up at home, one new thing that just launched on April 6th, 2020 is Quibi. And that is a new program. I have not subscribed to it or looked into it at all. I believe they're giving away some free trials. But from what I've heard, a lot of the shows on Quibi, they're very short. What are they, 10-minute episodes possibly? Or
Mhm.
um, I have not heard many good things about most of the episodes.
Well, I
Uh,
think it's hard. I mean, you know, we just Cinema Veritas just worked on a web series, and it's hard to create content for such a short amount of time that gives you a full story that you can actually follow the characters, get invested in them, and want to come back and see what happens with them next week. Our episodes for our web series Spare Room are 15 minutes long. So a 10-minute time chunk to get through enough that you care about these characters and you want to come back seems like a really daunting challenge. And while you might be able to make one or two, you know, Quibi stories or shows, I can't imagine it being, a very you being able to come up with a lot of different types of content that are very successful.
yeah, it's hard to really invest in a world in a new like 10-minute long show. It's easy to get wrapped up in a world of a 2-hour movie because you forget if you really focus and you're really tuned in and it's really well done, you can kind of forget the world around you and put yourself in that movie,
Hmm.
in that universe. And I don't know if 10 minutes is a long enough time to really rope somebody in. Uh, I've heard a few good things, but for the most part, most of the shows that I've heard are kind of like a trash TV market. There's definitely a lot of YouTube people on Quibi. There's a lot of Vine people that used to do the 6-second films and 6-second videos. There's a
Mhm.
whole world for that. And I mean, Vine, I used to love Vine, and I'm now one of the regretfully people. I'm on TikTok, and I love it. I'm not gonna lie. TikTok is fun. Uh, there's lots of different types of content out there, and the short form is very consumable too. Because I'll sit on TikTok, I'll binge that for 2 hours. And
You
those are
don't realize how much time has passed when you go look at videos that way.
I lay in bed and I'm like, it's 10 p.m. I'm gonna go to bed. I'll watch a couple TikToks and just kind of fade off. And I like skim it for a minute, maybe 5 minutes goes by, and I look at the clock and it's 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, what happened?
Mhm.
But if Quibi is going for that kind of a format where they can have a small bingeable show and you just binge through all of it really quickly because they are pretty short, they might do pretty well. I read a rumor that the way Quibi works when you have it, and I don't know if this is true, is that when you're holding your phone, if you hold it horizontally, it will adapt to be shown in a horizontal format. Or if you hold it vertically, it'll adapt to be shown in that format. And so apparently they filmed the shows both ways, and your phone orientation will adapt based on how you're holding your phone.
Well, that's interesting.
Supposedly. Yeah, definitely, because I always hated taking IGTV, taking Instagram videos, turning my phone sideways. I hated having to adjust my phone to get the content facing the right way. So if Quibi is doing that on its own, that's new. That's very cool technology.
Yeah.
But that is a rumor. I don't know if that's true. It might be true for some shows and not all. I have not checked out Quibi, but I have not heard many good things to worthy of checking it out. But you never know. It might be something that sticks around. And I'm looking now, there seems to be quite a few shows. Chrissy Teigen has a courtroom show.
Mhm.
I'm seeing a show with Idris Elba.
I think Liam Hemsworth has a show on there. Kaylin Olsen from Always Sunny has a show on there.
I mean, I love her. That whole It's Always Sunny crew, I could watch anything those guys put together.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, Quibi has been around for a couple years now, getting themselves ready, and they finally launched in April. So maybe it is worth checking out.
Yeah.
That's what's new. And I feel like we had something else. We had another current event, or we were talking about the fact that it's pretty difficult right now to make any film, but specifically on the actor's side of things,
Mhm.
the world of self-taping is becoming more intricate. And I think a lot of people too, a lot of filmmakers behind the camera are also adapting for the quarantine, in that they're focusing less on things on set and they're trying to get more into writing and editing and things like that. But how has the acting world been affected by COVID, and what's going on there?
Well, I mean, obviously, nothing's happening. Projects are getting pushed back. But in the downtime, there have been a lot of like meet and greets with casting directors online. And, the industry has been kind of moving towards self tapes a lot anyway. Not the biggest fan of self tapes. I feel like, it's really impersonal. And I think that one of the side effects of a self tape is that, you know, an actor has to feel like they're ready all the time to do it, because the idea of it is, oh, they can just do it in their home. But, you know, a lot of times it's okay, you get the notification that you need to do a self tape. Well, you have to find a reader, and you got this notification while you were at your day job. You have to be able to finish all your stuff up for the day, get home, do it, and send it out in a timely manner. Now, obviously, we're all home and we have time to do it. So I have a lot of friends who are just self taping and doing these meet and greets like crazy. And in fact, some of the actor groups that I'm a part of, where you can meet industry professionals, talk to them, get exposure to them. Some of them are even saying that some of the commercials that people are booking during this downtime, they're getting the equipment sent home to them, instructions how to set up the equipment, film it themselves, and then sending it back.
Trying to put me out of work, huh?
I, I mean, it's a little insane. Like, I don't know then how that changes the compensation that you get. Like, well, I was just a whole one-man crew. for making this commercial for you. How does this work? But I mean, it's now a new possibility that you could literally book a commercial, have the equipment sent to you, film it yourself, and then send everything back out to the people who edit it and put it out.
I mean, that's pretty wild. Personally, I feel nervous about packages getting delivered to me because I'm like, what this packages come from where, It could be covered in the virus and I would never know. And then I open it and then, having someone send me a camera and audio equipment, lighting equipment, that would make me really nervous as an actor. Luckily, I have all this stuff sitting here right behind me, but for actors that aren't so tech savvy, and I know so many that are really bad with technology.
Well, we're starting to have to adapt with like your own like self-tape studio at home.
Yeah.
That
For every actor that isn't good with technology, there's another one that is really good with it and knows how to film themselves and do vlogs and YouTube things and chats and podcasts and similar stuff like this. So there are a lot of actors that know what they're doing, but it also takes away from the actors that, just because they're tech savvy doesn't mean they're not super talented and great actors.
Yeah.
So it takes away from their possibilities, which kind of sucks. So we're kind of limited right now. I'm curious how this is going to affect the future. I'm hoping that people will be able to take the time while we're locked down, do the self-tapes, write the thing, edit the movie, come up with the creative idea and have those Zoom meetings now. And as soon as the world reopens up, we get back to work and start making some really amazing content for people to take in. I'm hoping that that's what happens. It's tough to see the future. Who knows when we'll be back to normal. Right now, as of right now, we're looking at least another 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks in quarantine until May 15th. But that's at the time of filming this podcast. I'm not sure when this is going to come out, but it's tough to know what the future of the industry is going to be. I think it's safe to say that it's going to be very heavily impacted by what's been going on.
Mm-hmm. But it's never gonna go away. People always want and need entertainment and an escape. So unfortunately, I feel like the hardest hit parts of this industry are going to be the up and comers, the new ones, the people, the small companies, the small theaters, the young ones trying to make a difference and make their mark with very little funds. But hopefully.
I mean, personally, my own company, NuView Productions, we had a couple of film projects in the lineup. We had a couple projects for businesses we were getting ready to shoot. We had a bunch of weddings lined up that we were going to be filming some weddings, and everything's just on hold. And unfortunately, it's just pushed back, which stinks. It could have been worse, I suppose, as with most things. Luckily, everybody I know is healthy and doing okay. But in terms of work, everything's just on hold and pushed back. Even the big companies too. It's not even just the small companies. I think the bigger companies are going to be fine because they have the infrastructure and the capital to just hold down the fort until everything blows over. But those small companies, they're going to be washing away a little bit. But yeah, those small companies, they're going to be coming back. Hopefully after the quarantine, they'll come back stronger. But now's the time. Write that script, tell that story, talk to your friends about it. The AFC right now is ripe with people trying to come up with their own ideas, trying to come up with projects to bring to light. And, in terms of a timetable, pretty much like, okay, after the quarantine is over, we can start. So who knows if that means June, if that means July. I think we're going to be kind of stuck with a position of, even though that we can get back to work, at least some of us can get back to work. The film industry and the theater industry too, they are not solo ventures. They're definitely very big group events every time. Any standard film set can have anywhere between 5 and 50 people. So those types of gatherings are going to be tough to put together. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of a lot of people in the industry that can't find work because where the companies used to be able to say, yeah, let's have an extra person on set. If we have the money, let's do it. Now it's a health concern to say, if there's an extra person on set, you never know. Let's steer away from that. Though I do believe that the film industry is very efficient. A lot of times it's compared to like almost a military-esque type of environment, where if you don't serve a purpose, you're probably not going to be there. So I don't foresee too much job loss in the industry, but there might be a little bit. So in terms of acting, I don't know if actors might feel the same way, but it depends on the movie.
It's definitely going to be strange at first, like trying to get back into things. You're not going to be able to really have, big shows, big casts, that kind of thing. And also it's just, you need it for live theater. You generally need an audience. So if the audience can't be there, it doesn't matter what you really have. You can try and, I know they're trying to adapt to doing live shows. And they're talking about, changing how people sit in the audience, but like packed houses tend to be very necessary to continuing paying for these events and paying the people that make theater happen. So it's all really very up in the air. We don't really have any compass to guide us in how to deal with this. This is all extremely new. So I have no idea how we're going to slowly start to get back into creating live theater where people can be together, but it will eventually happen. It's just a question of when and how.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, especially with like Broadway too, which I think is just closed indefinitely. Movie theaters are definitely in the same boat. I think, streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, all those, they're definitely going to be on a nice little upswing because of the bingeable content, but it's really just about if people can adapt certain things and certain shows to be, maybe we see some plays happen pay-per-view and the stages are rented out. That might be an opportunity to have audience members sit in and watch a play happen live. And but it's just not the same without the energy of the other people going to see it. So I don't know if that's something that could be possible. They're trying to do it with MMA. If they can do it with MMA, I don't see why they can't do it with at least smaller scale shows. As long as they have a stage and people are tested and made sure that they're safe, I think it might be okay to, put a show together like that. But New York City is definitely the worst place to be because it's just the most condensed area. So doing shows from New York might be really tough. Maybe from another state, not sure. But yeah, hopefully filmmakers will find a way to adapt. We will overcome the coronavirus one way or another. What do you think? Do we have anything else that we can chit chat about?
I think we're pretty much set for our very, very first episode.
Yeah, I think our listeners have learned quite a bit about us. We talked about how we will have day players in the future. We talked about some movies. We talked about The Goodbye Girl. We talked about Logan. All right, well, thank you guys for watching and listening in to the AFC Podcast.
You guys can like, follow, subscribe. Stay tuned for all the upcoming episodes we have. I'm Victoria Fragnito.
I'm Jim Galizia. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next time.